Good morning. Are you well? Wonderful. My name is Mark. If we haven't had a chance to meet, I'm one of the pastors in the life of this church, and it is just a great privilege. And we're really excited to be back and have the privilege of preaching this morning. But before I jump in, I just want to bring awareness. And in Acts 11, there's a situation where there's a famine in Judea, and the church in Antioch, they just respond. They had no obligation, but they chose to take spiritual responsibility for what was happening there. And it says this: the disciples determined, everyone according to his own ability, to send relief to brothers living in Judea. Right now, there are fires happening in our nation, but there's actually fires happening very close to home as well. 3 years ago, you're going to see a video from a man who is dearly loved in this church, a very beautiful man named Wayne Barthus, him and his wife served as full-time pastors in the life of this church for many years, and 3 years ago planted Faith Village in Racing Park to serve the community of Dunoon. And right now, many, if not most, of their church community have moved into the church facility because they have been displaced due to the fires that has happened. As a church, I want to let you know, even as we take up offerings this morning, we've already responded with finances to make sure the people there are fed and made warm with blankets and that kind of stuff. But we'd love to invite you, as Wayne will give us a little insight into what's going on there, to bring what's actually needed as families need to rebuild. And hundreds of families have been displaced with whole homes burnt down. It is clothing that's required. It's basic appliances. It's basic things like things that we take for granted sometimes, toothpaste and those kind of things, that they're just on finances in January to resource. Kids starting school, all those kind of things. So as a church, we've already given financially in a generous way, and we'll continue to do that. But we want to invite you to be a part of it. But why don't you turn your eyes to the screen? This is Wayne. He leads the community there. He's a little bit tired from a day of fighting fires and helping people, but let's listen to Wayne.
Good morning, Life Changes Church. Thank you so much for all your donations and everything that you've done for us during this very, very sad, unfortunate time. And a lot of our people are left desolate without homes, and the fire just wreaked havoc around in the neighborhood. And so we just want to say thank you to all those who came forward financially as well as physically in terms of clothing that they've donated towards the Faith Village people. We want to say thank you. It's been a tough time. The people are struggling more than ever, and we want to say thank you to Mark. We want to say thanks for picking up that phone and just checking in and making sure everything is okay, and then to the donations being spread all around for us to make sure that everything works perfectly well here in the neighborhood. So thank you so much to everyone there, to Life Changes Church for blessing us, and we are so filled with gratitude towards what you are doing, and we pray that God will continue to bless you and keep you, and that he will fill the coffers that are empty, because you will never, ever be without anything that God has promised you. So,
and that is just some of the photos from the area where homes have been literally burnt to the ground. And so here's the thing: no obligation, but actually our privilege to be a part of sowing and seeing people restored. This is a church community that was planted out of this community. Many of the leaders in the life of the church came from this community, and we want to make sure we continue to bless and be a part of that story. So if you want to and you have clothes at home, go home today and find the clothes you don't need. Bring them back to the 5 p.m. service. You don't have to stay for church. You can drop them off, or you can stay for church and drop them off, or you can bring them back tomorrow or Tuesday. There is a timeless thing, and these are needed now. And so we've already jumped in financially as best as we can, and we'll continue to do that. But if you can be a part of that, should we do that? It's who God's called us to do that. So let's continue to support and be a part of the story. And obviously, when a pastor basically only goes on a holiday to get stories for preaching. That's why they go on holiday. It's the only reason we go on holidays. And normally it's the crazy stories, and I've got some crazy stories. I had brand new glasses. They lasted 6 days, and then I donated them to the Breda River. Not important. But I can't really see you guys, but these are my old ones. But the font's really big on my iPad. I'm not going to show you how big because you'll be able to read it. But there's many other crazy stories. But actually, one of the things is actually a little bit of a sadness. We have loved the Cedarburg Valley for many, many years. The Cedarburg Mountains have been a home for us as a family. We would retreat there with 3 boys. Camping is a good option. They escape, they come back for food, and then they go again. It's a wonderful holiday. You don't have to entertain them. You just have to feed them. But we've got one or two photos. This has been our experience of the Cedarburg Valley and the mountains there, just green and lush and beautiful. One more photo of that. This is a valley that we've cycled. I've cycled up the pass. This photo is taken from 8 Cake Pass looking down the valley. And yet that is the exact spot where the fire that's just raged for 14 days started to burn as a car set it ablaze. And this has been the result. And it's just a picture I want to give you. Maybe leave that picture up for now. 45,000 hectares burnt. Everyone goes, wow, but none of you, like me, actually know how big that is. Because we don't know what a hectare is. It is 450 square kilometers. Or 63,000 football pitches of land has been scorched to the ground. Of beautiful territory, mountains, trees. The only thing still remaining, the river and the rocks. Everything else burnt. It's just such a stark, striking image. And why it's such a stark, and I want to start it because we start the year and we put all our plans in place and all these things that we get consumed by. And some of you are keen for a new car this year, so you're on Auto Trader and every day you get updates and alerts just in case. The one, the Lord has spoken, comes on. Others, it's the new dream and it's the job you're chasing and it's all the jobs, and we get consumed all these things. And yet, at the center of our story as believers is a God who reigns and describes himself in this way. In Deuteronomy 4, it's the context is God's holiness and covenantal faithfulness and his fire that consumes idolatry, these things that rise up in our hearts. Tim Keller said our hearts are an idol factory. Every one of our hearts, an idol factory. You deal with one, the next one pops up. Hello, I'm here. And thank you, Risa. Lovely to see you. And it says this in verse 23, be careful not to forget the covenant of the Lord, your God, he made with you. Do not make for yourself an idol in the form of anything the Lord your God has forbidden. For the Lord your God is a consuming fire, a jealous God. And then in Hebrews, there's this presentation of God. It's God's holiness that still burns, but now within the grace of his unshakable kingdom. And in the context of that, he presents this reality, the first mountain, the mountain of Sinai, which is fear, and it's all these things, and it's distance, and it's fire, and it's darkness. And then he presents, but you're not there anymore. You're in the mountain of Zion. It's joy, it's angels, it's the church. But he writes it this way, therefore, since we are receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken, let us be thankful, and so worship God acceptably with reverence and awe, for our God is a consuming fire. It is a direct quote from Deuteronomy, but it is not saying and presenting God like a consuming fire. It's not a simile. It's not saying God is just like a consuming fire. He says our God, the self-revelation of God, is a consuming fire. And as we look at those photos of the Cedarburg and see what a consuming fire does, it consumes everything. And yet, I want to preach today about don't play with fire. It's a little bit heavy. But as we start there, I don't think there's a more important message. I'm not much of a social media guy. Generally, 11 o'clock on a Monday morning, I phone Gabriel Phillips. He brings me up to speed with what's happening in the world. He tells me it was preached in about 7 different churches on the weekend. He somehow caught it all up. He then fills me up with world news and ends with what Donald Trump did this week. It's a quick update. Most people take hours. I get it from Gabe in about 12 minutes. But I had a little bit of time. And this don't play with fire is a statement every one of us has got from our parents. Years ago, Candace was in the kitchen and Ben, she smelled something funny. She looked outside. There's Ben by the pool, just standing there, straight up, big blue eyes like this. She didn't think much of it until she started to smell something was burning. Something, so you know that smell, something's burning. My boy Ben had taken his favorite rubber dinosaur and to put it up against the heater and just see what would happen, you know. And then when it caught a light, what he'd do is he put it under a chair because, well, Mom would be cross. And so the chair caught a light, everything's caught a light, cans in the kitchen, Ben's outside. Fortunately, the house didn't burn down by the grace of God. But I've been a little bit on social media, and there's this story that's gone around, and the church is celebrating. It's the story of a pornographic actress who's famous for radical scenes and hundreds of men in minimal time who has just been baptized. And everything in me wants to go, yes. If I'm being honest, yes. But then I read a little bit further and I get a little bit more down the line. And please don't go search. It gets dangerous. But she also feels that her Christian faith is compatible with the lifestyle. And believing religion should be inclusive will not change anything about her profession or decision. So it's this rededication and reactivation of my faith story, but don't touch anything about who I am or what I'll do with my story. And yet my Bible says God is a consuming fire. Also deeply grieved, and not here to judge, but a man who's influenced my story, written an amazing book like What Made So Amazing About Grace, Philip Yancey, confessed to 8 years of an affair. And I'm going, I don't know how. To be brutally honest, I met God when I was 14. I encountered God, and there was something of a holy fear that is necessary to walk this earth. And I fear that much of the church sees God as a comforting fire. A fire to warm us up, like a little Bunsen burner. I want to warm up the area of my relationships. God, could you warm it up for me? A fireplace, a fire pit, a bride that we keep contained and limited to a space. Rather than who he identifies himself as, a consuming fire that consumes, that isn't easily stopped, that when it blows, it's not a comforting fire, not a decorative fire, and not a manageable fire. And I think there's a tension in modern Christianity where we want the warmth of God, but we don't want the weight of his glory. We want his presence, and we sing in his presence, but we don't want his purifying touch. We want him close, but not close enough to burn anything that we like. Firstly, simply this, consuming fire is not a name. Jehovah Rapha, all these names of God. It is not a name, it is a description of how and who God is. And when God describes himself as a consuming fire, he doesn't need permission to burn. He doesn't negotiate with everything it touches. I'm going to burn that tree. No, I'm not. It's not a conversation. A fire just blows and wind blows and that fire blows and it cannot be stopped. And I really don't want to be insensitive to people who've been affected by fires now around our nation. But I think so much of the church is running to all the scriptures that mention water or rain. But actually we should be aware that our God is a consuming fire. My heart needs to be aware that my heart is a consumer unless it is consumed by God. The consuming fire, I'm in trouble. The fire consumes by nature. God never reveals himself as fire to make people feel unsafe or to feel safe. He reveals himself as fire to make people holy. And we are on that journey. Secondly, I want to tell you, you cannot contain it. That fire in the Cedarburg started apparently with a vehicle that overheated at the top of 8 Cake Pass. It is a hectic pass, towing a trailer. The car went up, the caravan went up, and 45,000 hectares burned. A consuming fire can't be managed. It can't be miniaturized. It can't be controlled. It can't be scheduled. It cannot be used selectively. This is not a controlled burn. And often we come to God and we say, hey, God, could you come and just burn that area of my life? Come burn there, but just don't touch these areas. And so we say things like, God, you can have this part of my life. You can speak here, but not there. You can bless me there, but don't confront me there. You can save me there, but don't change me there. And I think that's dangerous. Because actually what Hebrews is talking about is worship, and it's reminding us that reverence is the posture. It's just, I am in a posture of reverence. That awe is my response, because fire is the reason. The consuming fire that is God. And I think we can get this wrong. I know I've got this wrong. I used to be nervous of this power of God. But there's some characters in the Bible. Do you know these guys? Nadab and Abihu. Anybody know those guys? Anybody? Leviticus 10. None of you have read it. In 2026, I know. Leviticus, they are Aaron or Aaron's sons. No, I'm joking. Aaron. And I want to read about these guys because they got it wrong, and they took what is consuming holy fire and they made it comforting. Something we can handle. It says this: Aaron's sons, Nadab and Abihu, took their censers, put fire in them, and added incense. And they offered unauthorized fire before the Lord contrary to the command. In the very chapter before, they are priests that had been given Levitical laws on how to facilitate the fire of God, and they decided they'll just make their own. Forget the obedience factor. So fire came out of the presence of the Lord and consumed them, and they died before the Lord. Moses then said to Aaron, their dad, "This is what the Lord spoke of when he said, 'Among those who approach me, I will be proved holy. In the sight of all the people, I will be honored.' Aaron remained silent." That's what a father should do when his kids have been fired up. What are you looking at, Impele? Oh, not Hebrews 12. Leviticus 10. Is that the one? Yes, I just didn't change the thing. Apologies for that. But these guys, they had a very defined way to facilitate the power of God. They didn't deny God. They didn't even reject worship. They did something more subtle in that. They just redefined. And we live in a world where we feel the freedom to redefine. So I love God in this era of my life, but I don't like his mandates for relationships and sexuality. I don't like his mandates for my finances and his ways that are different to mine. And so we bring our plans to God and say they're not my plans. And there's so much talk of this strange fire in the world and the church world, and yet I don't think the greatest danger to the church actually is strange fire at all. I think the greatest danger to the church of 2026 is familiar fire. Where we playing. You ever did that with kids? You like put your hand through the fire. Look, I'm not getting burnt. I'm not getting burnt. I'm not getting burnt. The greatest danger is familiar fire. There was a man named Jim Bakker. He was a tele-evangelist in the 1980s in America, where tele-evangelism was huge. He just happened to also start a Ponzi scheme. Stole money from thousands. Ended up getting a 40-year sentence. And in prison, he read John Bevere's book about the holiness of God. And John Bevere got this invitation to go and visit him in prison. And John's like, what? This guy's done fraud. He's taking money from people. So he went and met the guy. And the guy said, thank you for coming. And amazing encounter happened. John Bevere said, I have to ask you. You obviously had a gift. You'd obviously encountered God at some stage of your life. When did you stop loving God? Jim Bakker said, stop loving God? I never stopped loving God. I did stop fearing him. And I think that's a warning to us today and a reminder in 2026 that actually stop being so obsessed and worried about strange fire, and maybe, just maybe, get more worried about familiar fire. We come to God in his presence and we sing songs, and remember whose presence you are coming, the consuming fire. And the next time you pray and God's talking to you on an area in life, but you just don't want to talk about it. I've got teenagers. I know what that's like. They just don't. You want to talk, they'll just look at you. We do that with God. I'm a teenager with God. I don't want to talk about this. So God says, but my fire cannot be contained. You think you can start a fire in your living room and it's not going to touch your bedroom? It's not going to touch that part of the house? Your little secret place in the back there? I want to tell you, a fire that calls and consumes. In Exodus 3, there's an encounter with a guy named Moses, an incredible man, but up till this page, he hadn't done a whole lot, and he'd spent 40 years in the desert being a shepherd. And in those years, God was finding and fashioning, but he encountered a burning bush, and it goes like this in Exodus 3. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that through the bush, though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. So Moses thought, I will go over and see the strange sight, why the bush does not burn up. When the Lord saw that he'd gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush, Moses, Moses. And Moses said, here I am. Because of this fire, because of this moment, the fire interrupted the very routine of his day. He was getting on with his sheep. Now God speaks to him from a bush. It makes some area that was completely normal, just part of his daily life and area, becomes holy ground. And this purpose that he felt, I'm going to settle in this nice sedentary life. I've made a wife. I've got a family. I've got all this going on. God says, I'm calling you to purpose, and my purpose is to set my people free. This is the guy who led God's people through an open sea. God had to grip him and reveal the burning, overwhelming, consuming fire nature of God so that he could lead God's people through a desert for 40 years. But to do that, he had to shake him out of his smallness and shake him out of his contained space. This fire wasn't there to destroy Moses. This fire was there to redefine him When last did you come to God and say, God, would you redefine me? Or do you always come with your story, your preferences, your prejudices? God, come and bless me in my story. And I think we've forgotten that God says, I am a consuming fire. When did I ever tell you I was a KDAC gas burner? Just going to put my problem on the KDAC and wait for it to heat up. Okay, it's done. And then you just turn me off? You think you turned me off? I'm the God who spoke and it was. I'm the God who parted the seas. I'm the God who slayed Goliath. I'm that guy. And if you come to me and you say, be my savior, you need to decide whether you want me to burn or not. Because where I go, burning will happen. And idols will burn and they will melt to nothing. And prejudices and smallnesses, they will melt to nothing. And all your safety and all the things you're putting in place to keep you safe, I want to tell you, the safest place you can be is in the fire of the God who reigns on high, whose grace is glorious. It's the safest place you can be, and you will never burn out. God says to him, take off your sandals, for the place where you're standing is holy ground. Fire always precedes calling. And I know inside of each and every one of you, there's a call. There's a God design. There are things God's called you to. This is my wife. And she didn't want this. Leading. Being a part of God's kingdom. We were happy being in the background. Well, she was. And God called us and we left our jobs and careers and years of study going to ministry, and then we hit an impasse. Doof. And the impasse was, my wife don't want to do this. And I knew I couldn't push her, couldn't force her. I couldn't do it. So year 1, year 2, I knew God had called me to do this, to preach the gospel, to lead. I knew. But I'm married, covenanting someone, so I'm saying, God, you got to do it or I can't. And so to be honest, I started looking and I started thinking, hey, I'd like to go back to be like one of you Lani's in the business there, you know. Go make money for Jesus. I'm going to go back. I like that place. But one moment, in a meeting, a ladies' meeting, God sent a man with a prophetic gift, and he called out my wife. And he prophesied over my wife. And amongst 800, 900 ladies, he got her to stand up. And from the back, watching, I saw the Spirit of God come on my wife. My quiet, don't draw attention to yourself, wife, started to scream under the presence of God for 45 minutes as God burnt off some fears and he burnt off some things. And I'm telling you, for that one moment in the presence of God, it's the only reason we're here today. And I'm grateful. And I've had moments, I was 14 years old and I encountered God. I'm so grateful. And there have been times where you want to run and you want to hide. But nothing compares to being the fire of God burning in your soul. We've got to wrestle this notion that God is a comforting fire. Because He's not. He's actually not interested in your comfort. Actually, I would probably tell you He's more interested in your discomfort on this side of eternity. Because I think heaven's going to be pretty comfortable. And I think choreographed don't even make the grade. In the fanciest kitchens this world could provide. No, heaven's going to be amazing. But on this side of eternity, a comforting fire says, come as you are and stay as you are. A consuming fire says, come as you are, but don't expect to live unchanged. A comforting fire soothes wounds, and a consuming fire removes idols. A comforting fire affirms feelings. A consuming fire confronts sin. A comforting fire keeps you safe. A consuming fire makes you holy. Everything God consumes, He consumes in His grace. There's no time to fear. Everything God burns, He burns to bring healing. And everything God takes, He replaces with something better. But the question is, do you want God to come close? The question is, do you want God, the consuming fire, to consume your life? I mean, consume. You know those things you hide and you delete and you think no one knows about? I mean, consume everything. This year cannot be about more comfort, more safety, easier Christianity. I've worshipped God since I was 14. I said that earlier. I think I've made some big decisions for God. Sacrifices, paid some prices. And part of me, my carnal, selfish part, the part outside of the consuming fire of God goes, God, I just want to get away from it all a little bit. But I said to God, would you burn? The fire we fear, that God would come and reveal, because His fire reveals. The only things left in that valley in the Cedarburg, rocks and rivers. Everything else gone. Fire is revealed. The fire that threatens our comforts is actually the fire that protects what God is calling us to. And it's time to see the consuming God. Is your God a consuming fire or a comforting fire? I want to tell you one last thing as we land this morning. Scripture doesn't present God to you and I as your support system for 2026. I need to come back to God. And I know maybe you're here today and you're going, 2025 really was a poor year. So I got to change something. I need to plug into a new support system. So I'm going to come plug into God. No, Scripture presents God as a holy fire that burns. I'm not saying I love it. I'm not saying it's always enjoyable. But I will tell you it's for eternal purposes. The temporary has to burn. That valley that we've loved and we've enjoyed and we've hiked, it'll grow again. And it'll be greener. There'll be life. God burns what is false so the true can stay. God burns what is shallow so the deep can be revealed. And He burns what is unsafe so the unshakable can stand. Can you stand with me this morning? I'm preaching to myself this morning. If you're a believer this morning, it's time to come close again to the consuming fire. It's time to realize He's not tame. He won't be the little bit extra to your life. I do all this, and I worship Jesus. He'll be the blazing fire that is the center of it all. He'll burn away some idols, but He'll bring life. And everywhere there's a burning, there's life, and there's healing. There's oil, there's freedom, and there's joy. The song that Olivia is playing was quite a big song when I was a young adult, making big decisions. There'd been some disappointments in my story. There'd been some losses. There'd been some pains. At a stage in my life, it was quite critical. Our family went through a disastrous time, and I got an opportunity to go overseas. I'm in a foreign country. No one knows me. And to be honest, there was a temptation to just throw it all away. Who would know? No social media at the time. But I'd encountered the consuming fire of God when I was a teenager. In a room in Davenport, Durban, where the floors were at an angle, I'd encountered the presence of God. It's the safest place I could be. It's the safest place I could be. It's the safest place you can be. Maybe hearing me speak, say, I don't want that. I don't want that. I'm scared of fire. I don't want that. I want to tell you, the safest place you can be is in the consuming fire of God that does not consume. It brings healing and freedom and life. And everything else that is eternal, that is temporal and not of our eternal fire burns away. It's time to come close. It's just time to say, God, you can have it all. We close our eyes just for a moment. Maybe here, you've never made the decision. I want to tell you about a Father who's kind. As a father on this earth, I've not always been kind. I've struggled with anger at times. I've got frustrated. But the Father in heaven is perfectly kind. He's faithful. And He says, bring it. The temptation is to put the stuff, the things you don't talk about at Christmas dining room tables. The temptation is to put in the back room and say, Father, just burn bright here. He says, bring me the stuff. Let me burn it up. Those failures, those stains, those disappointments, let me burn it up. And let me reveal my glory. Let me reveal my glory. Consuming fire, fan into flame, a passion for your name. Spirit of God, won't you fall in this place? Lord, have your way. Lord, have your way. Consuming fire, fan into flame, a passion for your name. Spirit of God, won't you fall in this place? Lord, have your way. Lord, have your way in us. Lift your hands up to the King today. It's time to come close. It's time to take the barriers off, the limitations off, those safeguards that you've put around the glory of God in your life. It's time to open up and say, God, would you burn? Would you burn? Would you burn? Would you burn? Would you burn in every part of my life? Would you burn for your glory? Would you burn away the lies? Would you burn away the liars and the idols that come, that your glory would be revealed? And like Moses, would you speak purpose and would you speak life? And would you remind us that you are the glorious God, reigns, is seated on His throne, calling your people close, and yet you are the consuming fire. The consuming fire. So we worship and we bow down, we bring glory to your name. Fall in this place. Lord, have your way. Lord, have your way. This consuming fire, fan into flame, a passion for your name. Spirit of God, won't you fall in? Lord, have your way. Lord, have your way. And consuming fire, fan into flame, a passion for your name. Spirit of God, won't you fall in this place? Lord, have your way. Lord, have your way. Oh, Lord, have your way. Lord, have your way. And Lord, have your way. Lord, have your way with us. Lord, have your way with us as we bow down before you. Speak your word, speak your word, God. You are the God who brought water from the rock and opened up the heavens. Speak, Lord, speak, Lord. I will draw near to the risen God, where all my fears and failures shine bright. And I will trust Him and His gentle touch to bring healing in the dead of the night.